Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy that so many people made it today to join our webinar introducing the requirements and system portal. Really appreciate it that we have this session here today. And actually, I'm really excited that we have this webinar now in the morning, and in the evening we have the same webinar for the US time zones. So it's an exciting day for Altium and also for the ex-Valley Space team within Altium now to be able to have this webinar holding today, because today is a very exciting day for the company. Today we are officially launching the so-called requirements and system portal application within Altium 365. And today in the webinar, we would like to give you an overview of what this actually is, why there is now a requirements and system application within A365, how does it relate to electronic development. And for this purpose, I'm not alone today. So my name is Florian Reger. I will be hosting this webinar today. But I have with me Luis and Marco, who are the co-founders of Valley and now within Altium, driving forward the system engineering and the requirement management. But please, Luis, start introducing yourself quickly, please.
Thanks, Florian. Thanks for the introduction. I'm, as you said, same as you. I'm super happy to be here today because it's a very big milestone in the integration of Valley Space into Altium, now in the form of requirements and systems portal. My background myself is in satellite engineering. So when we started Valley Space, it was really to help engineers like ourselves to be able to build better product and not think so much about all the non-engineering things that we had to do, like looking up values in documents or sending Excel files via email. So yeah, we really wanted to make a tool that is better for engineers. And now I think with integrating these requirements and systems portal into Altium, it's just going to make the vision better, right? I think it's going to add to the effect of helping engineers.
Yes, thanks a lot, Luis. I'm looking forward to the webinar today, and since you will be presenting the software itself, looking forward to that part specifically. Marco, you would like to introduce yourself also?
Thank you. Yes, very excited to be here. My name is Marco. I'm one of the ex-co-founders of Valley Space and also from the space industry originally. And I think what I'm most excited about for today is really it's becoming clear that products are more and more defined by the electronics that they have. So products are becoming more and more electronics centered. And in this, it becomes more and more tricky to manage overall the engineering, the systems engineering, the requirements for these products, and being able with the requirements and systems portal to really move that forward and help electronic engineers focus on the work that actually needs to be done and not on being paper pushers. That's really what excites me, and therefore I'm excited to be in here today.
Yes, thanks, Marco. Looking forward to the conversation. So what you will hopefully get presented today is not a pure slideshow. So we are trying to do this in a very conversational way. You will also going to see the software. Before we go to the details, for the audience, I would like to ask you to go with me through a bit of logistics. So we're going to have a Q&A session at the very end of the webinar. If you have any questions, please don't use the chat tool of Zoom. There is a specific Q&A tool in Zoom. Whenever you have a question throughout the webinar, put it please inside. So we are running through the webinar and we are trying to answer as much questions as possible at the end. So we will take about, depending, 5 to 10 minutes about time for the Q&A part. It's very important for us also to get feedback already now. So whenever you have a question, please in the Q&A tool, not in the chat tool. So today, it's all about the requirements and system portal. Of course, we're also looking in the beginning how this actually relates to the Altium 365. My assumption would be most of you have a relationship to electronic development, are pretty much aware of Altium Designer, pretty much aware of what Altium 365 is. We are making a very brief overview because we want to really focus today on the actual requirements and system portal part. For those of you who know ValleySpace, maybe there's a few people in this webinar who have an idea, or maybe who are even customers of ValleySpace. The ValleySpace application itself is now available within A365 as a so-called requirements and system portal application. So it's not a standalone system anymore. And the question is, why is Altium driving this initiative, or has been driven this initiative to actually bring requirements and system engineering into the context of electronic development? And again, I assume most of you are deeply involved in electronic development, and I believe that most of the things I will speak about in the next minute will sound pretty familiar to you. So when you are in the overall process, of course, the center of it is the hardware engineer, the PCB designers, and so on and so forth. These are the people who are actually doing the engineering work, the design work. But in most design organizations, you see very different people joining the overall development process, being it mechanical engineers, being it software engineers, embedded system engineers, but also project managers, product managers, engineering managers. So there's a lot of stakeholders involved in the overall engineering process, especially for the electronic development. And when we look at how this is happening today, how information is exchanged, it's a bold statement, but we are very confident saying that very often we see a very broken process, meaning that information is shared via email, which is in the first place not a very secure way to share company information. Then we see different tools holding the same type of data. Then we see, for instance, designs are being put on local servers. So the attempt and the benefit of a platform like A365 as an electronic development platform is to bring these different disciplines, these different stakeholders closer together, and removing the need to use, let's say, the non-standard information exchange systems. Let all the people work in one single place, and let all the different stakeholders collaborate on the very same data. This is what A365 is about. If you want to know more about the platform itself, I invite you to visit the altium365.com website. There's a lot of information, a lot of material around that to get more informed about that. Specifically, one part, which is, and that's why we are here today, which became more and more visible to Altium actually is when they launched the A365 platform. It's not only electronic design engineers or PCB designers who have been joining the A365 platform. What Altium has identified is that more and more people are actually collaborating on the PCB design itself in the form of giving comments to PCB design. And this is not only PCB designers. This can be software engineers, for instance. This can be system architects, engineering managers. So here we dive a little bit deeper into the, let's say, process flow. And here's where the requirements become a very crucial part. So instead of having the schematic design, the board design, very independent from the system engineering part, from where the products are being defined, the attempt here is to bring really these two disciplines very close together and allow them to actually work in a very iterative way and to let the information flow. So this is what the requirement system portal in the context of A365 is all about. And yeah, having that said, I think it's very important now to look a bit more on the requirement, let's say, landscape itself. So as Marco and Lucy have been saying before, we are coming from ValleySpace. So we have a very strong customer base on the system engineering part, on the requirement side. And what we want to dive into is actually how this relates very well with the electronics development process. So, Luis, if you can spend a few sentences or a minute or so on diving a bit deeper into what we see from the requirements landscape perspective. I think that would be very interesting for the audience.
Sure, I'll say a few words about it. So we actually made a survey a few weeks ago specifically to electronics engineers, right, that are working in Altium Designer, and asked them what are the tools that you use for requirements management in your company. And as you said, Florian, we've asked this question a few times now in a few contexts, and the answers are pretty much always similar, right? So you can see here from the survey results, we had almost 2,000 participants. And the majority of teams, they manage requirements using Excel or Jira, for example. Another interesting thing to point out in the survey is that there are around 15% that say that they have never seen requirements at all working with PCB projects. And this is definitely a problem because there are definitely requirements, even if the company doesn't have formal requirements.
Mm-hmm.
You are always working against something, right? You always want to, you always have some stakeholders, or you always have some criteria that you need to design your board against. And there are, only 10% of people who actually use a specialized tool to manage requirements. And this obviously leads to a lot of problems, like you have to manually update. There are a lot of changes that are happening that are not very well managed. There is no traceability of is this requirement actually fulfilled or not by your design. We create these silos, right, that we talked about in other webinars as well, right, that the teams are not communicating well with each other and working kind of on different parts of the design, but they don't fit together. So all of these things definitely are problems that we have encountered.
Well, thanks, Luis. I think, when I look at the results of the poll we did a couple of minutes ago, it's pretty much in line with that. I think today we even have we have 180 people joining right now. We even have a more tendency towards Excel, right? So it's a very common profile we see here, right? So I think the question people might have is, and like when we have been in touch with Altium more than 1 year ago now, the first times, I think a lot of people had this question, like why is this important for the electronic design process itself, and how is this actually happening today?
Yeah, sure. We've seen a lot of cases, right? And even when there are specialized tools used like JAMA, DOORS, or Polarion, and I saw in the survey now that there are a few people of you in the audience that are using these tools, even Valley Space, there is still this disconnect between the requirements and the PCB design. So we've seen people writing requirements in notes on the PCB design, which is a way of managing, right? It's a way of putting the requirements there so they are stored somewhere, or working with tasks, or working with comments in the PCB design. But it doesn't have this traceability or link to the actual high-level requirements, like the stakeholder requirements. I remember I was working, as I said, I'm a satellite engineer by training, and I was working in a satellite project, my last project before I started Valley Space. And I was basically working as a system engineer, and I was doing the software for the satellites. And I had colleagues that were actually working on the PCB design. And we were kind of working with our own assumptions, but they were not the same assumptions, right? So there were we didn't have any formal requirement system. We had some requirements spread out in Excel sheets. And I was basically designing the software for a certain orientation of the sensors and certain functionalities and pinouts, but then they didn't match what the PCB design team were doing, right? So, and this became a very big problem because I had to often redesign a lot of things because the design had changed. So this disconnect is still a problem, right? Even if you have a formalized specialized requirements tool, there is still no connection, and that's one thing that we're trying to solve, right? The link to the schematics and the PCB design, and even the parameterization of requirements, right? To allow for these automatic verifications so that when something changes, you don't have to go and knock on someone's door to tell them that something changed, but automatically you will get notified by these kind of things.
So what we see here in this screenshot from A365, it's something which has been identified, I think, a lot across the customer base, right? This is what my understanding. And as you can see, it's still, although it's already a shared schematic here, like many people can collaborate on that. It's still very manual in a sense of, okay, I need to take my Excel spreadsheet, for instance, and then I copy the requirement from here and there. So, and yeah.
Yes, definitely. And coming back to the survey, right? If you never have even seen the requirements that you're working against, it's going to be very difficult to do the right, go in the right direction. Right?
Yeah, what I was surprised about, and I think we can go a bit deeper also in a couple of minutes into that, is that there seems to be really this disconnect. Like the connection you can have on different levels, right? But this disconnect that there are design teams out there who just even don't know the requirements, right? I mean, like already linking requirements into a schematic or into a design directly, it's already, I would say, the next step. But even the fact that there is teams who just don't know what they are supposed to build in a formal way, in forms of requirements, that was a surprising element, at least for me. But okay. Yeah. Good. Luis, thanks a lot. So again, as I said, we are going to focus right now today on the requirements and system portal, and not so much on the A365 itself. Again, if you want to know more about it, please visit the website, altium365.com. There's a lot of information around it. Please do that. But I think that there's a lot of reasons why the requirement system portal is so much integrated into A365 right now. And specifically, I mean, Altium could have simply said, okay, like people have put their requirements inside the comments. Okay, let's make the comment function a bit better and make it a bit more fancy. So why did Altium actually decide to not do that, Marco?
Yeah, I think there was a clear realization inside Altium that engineering in the electronics world has become multidisciplinary. It is not only the electronics engineer, it's not only the PCB designer that works in isolation. It's really about all the stakeholders, right? It's a process in which you have all these different people involved. And as projects become more time pressured, as there's more demand to produce better electronics in shorter times that are more complex, there's new ways needed to actually manage these kind of relationships. It's not enough to think of a waterfall process in which you get the information once and then you can go into your cellar, do the thing, and then basically order it and it's there. It's a much more dynamic environment in which stakeholder requirements might change, in which evolutions happen, new parts come out as you're developing. There might be shortages, as we learned through the pandemic times. So in this dynamic part, Altium said, if we want to make sure that people really are able to build the right thing, requirements really need to spend a central role inside this development cycle. And that's, I think, the motivation why Altium went ahead and acquired at the end of last year ValueSpace as a company, bringing in the expertise and the software to basically close that loop on the Altium 365 landscape and say that Altium 365 is the tool in which all the engineering can happen. It's the one-stop shop where you can do that kind of work, and the requirement system portal therefore plays a significant role in that life cycle.
I mean, we all know the let's say the most prominent examples, like all the SpaceX's and Teslas out there, and I think it's very clear that these type of companies are doing something in a different way. So it's not about so much about the people work there, maybe also, but mostly about, okay, the way they approach engineering challenges is very different. So how does that tie in with what we have been doing in ValueSpace so far?
Yeah, I think the key part to it is really iterative processes, right? So instead of looking at a one-time development, and therefore basically any moment that you close some part of the project, there's a gate and it's a don't touch anymore mentality. The reality is that there's a lot of learnings on the way. There's things that change, and we all know that even in the old processes, this was a reality. You started to basically try to fit them into this waterfall process. But I think the best companies out there, they actually embrace that it's an iterative process to develop products. And what we've identified is that there's actually 4 key areas in any development that an engineering team basically goes through. So imagine if I'm trying to build a smartwatch, for example, right? A smartwatch has lots of different parts. It has different sensors. They have different interactions with software. There's different, maybe there's even an app in the ecosystem that somehow is related. So there's all these different parts. So the first step is always an understanding part. You have to understand, what is your system made of? How do these parts interact? What is it supposed to do? Because only if you understand all of these parts, you can make trade-offs on the lower level, basically. And that's the second point, right? You do assess. So if I have to decide, for example, for a temperature and humidity sensor on a smartwatch, if I know the actual requirements on the overall watch, like what kind of environment is this going to be used in, what kind of shaking does it have to go through, is this going to be used underwater or not? Does it have to be very accurate because it's a smartwatch that is for hikers, or is it a kid's smartwatch which just roughly has to indicate the temperature? These are the kind of information that you need. So from the understanding part, you move into the assessing part, so that you can make trade-offs very quickly, and that you also can understand what the impacts would be. So if you now say, okay, what would happen if I used actually the better sensor? Now you should be able to see all the implications that this has. Or let's say a part is not available and you need to go for another one. You want to know what the impact is. Where has this part already been planned? What kind of tests do we have to update? All this kind of information. As you went through this assessment part, now comes the point of coordination, right? Coordination is key because you have the people having to write the software for it, not only like the embedded software, but also the application software that goes maybe on your smartphone or something. You have to be able to coordinate with procurement to be able to get the right prices for what you're doing. And everyone always knows that involving those people early would have made your last project better, right? You would have seen things earlier. So coordination is a key point, being able to have discussions and conversations around specific aspects of your product, being able to get the approval or the review from everyone, both in the requirements, so that a technical person can look at the requirements and say, yes, that's possible, or here's an inconsistency, but also down the line to say like, okay, here we can prove this is all the things that we've been implementing, and we can basically, for compliance reasons, for example, show that we have taken them all into account. All of this is part of the coordination aspect. And the fourth part is really the implementation, right? Once you've understood, taken the decision, coordinated with every stakeholder, you still need to implement. And a lot of time is today wasted usually in writing documentation that you have to keep up to date, right? Any change that you made, now suddenly you have to go through the simulation tool again, you have to go again through the documentation tool, and that's a lot of work. And in an ideal case, what you would want is after you've made the decision, all this kind of information should be updated automatically. And this allows you to go back into this cycle. And if you look at the best companies, like you said, SpaceX, Tesla, and so on, these are the kind of companies that have understood that if you shorten these cycle times, if each iteration is very quick and it's not hard to make changes because you have full traceability and visibility of what you're doing, then you can react much faster to these kind of changes, bringing your product ultimately to market fast.
Yeah, great. We talk about SpaceX and Tesla type of companies. I'm happy that nobody dropped out now, because it's not a system which is designed or built only for these, let's say, type of companies. So like ValueSpace, but also now in the last couple of weeks we have onboarded customers, I would say, who are more on the let's say traditional end. However, they already benefit from using a different approach and way of working. So we work with Airbus, for instance, together, but across the customer base. We have also, let's say, initial conversation with automotive OEMs. We have customers in the energy sector, in the robotics sector. So aviation space, of course, is our home turf, so to speak. So it's more about changing the way how engineers work, right?
Absolutely. It's all about an approach that you can reuse, right? And going from the approach basically to the concrete parts, like what do you get if you use this kind of approach, and what do you use if you use a tool like the requirement system portal that supports your layers? So let's first talk about the essential parts, right? So what kind of things can you expect when you do requirements engineering, right, in the electronics development? You always have up-to-date specifications, right? What does that mean? It means that everyone at any point in time is always aware, what are we building? This means the customer is aware what he will get, everyone in the company is aware, and if there's changes introduced, this becomes very clearly communicated. Basically, people are notified, oh, there is a change, right? Here was an agreement made, maybe with the supplier, maybe an agreement made with the customer, and these changes propagate. But with versioning and history, you still keep the information, what has happened, what kind of decisions have been taken, what was the discussion around it. So if you have people joining the project a bit later, or maybe you have to go back and figure out what happened, you get basically the requirements history. You're able to collaborate with all of these people in the same place. And basically, as I said, at the very end, you have dashboards to see how many requirements have you actually taken into account. You get the documentation, which is automatically updated.
I pretty much like this differentiation between, let's say, the essential parts, which are very much in line with most requirement management systems also provide in a sense. We have certainly some different, interesting, nicer features around it. I think that's fair to claim it. But it's actually even more interesting in this context today. What's different then? What's the enhanced part?
And I think this is where the strength comes in of having the requirement systems portal as an integral part of Altium 365, right? Because it is connected directly inside the platform, and you have this end-to-end platform, you can connect the requirements directly to the design. So this means you can have both directions of traceability, right? You can basically trace from the requirements, where is each of these requirements, where have they been implemented in the electronics? That's one way for the engineer and project manager to understand. And you have the other way around, where you basically are inside the electronics, you wonder, why do we have this part here? And you can directly find the traceability. Does that come from a customer requirement? Is that because of a standard that has been implemented? Does that come from some other place, right? Then something that is also very unique is parametric requirements. So this means requirements oftentimes have values and numbers in them. And if these numbers basically don't fit your design, right, you have a problem. So usually you would have to check these kind of things by hand. But if you say, for example, a certain amount of power consumption should not exceed something, or a voltage needs to be a certain value, we can actually check these kind of requirements automatically and raise a hand and tell you, careful, your design is going off the rails here. And last but not least, there is an AI-assisted engineering aspect to it. I mean, we live in an age in which any company that wants to move fast and forward quickly into the future needs to figure out how to best make use of AI functionalities. And what you get is inside the tool directly a capability to check your requirements, find inconsistencies in them so that you don't follow along and at the end of the development just look back and see like, oh, we could have seen this. You can improve requirements, because ambiguous requirements are always tricky. If you have ambiguous requirements, you'll not get the product that you want. So these kind of checks are the perfect cases which can be automated, and where an AI assistant can basically tell you what is going right and what's going wrong.
Marco, thank you so much. I think this is a very good door opener for the next part, which is going to be the demonstration. Louise, we are all excited to see the demo now.
Thank you. I'm excited to show a bit a demonstration of requirements and systems portal in the context of Altium. And let me share my screen. I'll replace your screen, Florian.
Yes, please.
It
works.
Yeah, great. So I'm very excited to show it. It's going to be a very short demo, so I'm not going to spend too much time. But we'll for sure have sessions that show a bit more details if you want. But so you can see here on the screen the requirements and systems portal integrated into the Altium environment. So if you are familiar with A365, you can see here that it's one of the apps on the A365 platform, together with the normal workspace and viewer and the BOM portal. And I'm going to show you a bit how you can get started, right? So imagine you are one of those more than 50% of people that actually manage your requirements in Excel files. I'm gonna pull up here a file. So for example, imagine that you are working on your power distribution board and you have these requirements managed in Excel. Then what we talked about, all the benefits of having them in a system, having them connected to PCB design, what you can do is you can basically start here in the requirement systems portal. And I've created now here a power system specification. And you can create here a section for the power distribution board or system. And it's very easy here to be able to import requirements to your system. Let me just pull this up. So I'm just dropping here that file. And you can see here that you can map basically all of the fields to the fields that are inside the tool. And if I click import, it will do some magic. And you can see here that the requirements are already being created and imported. And you can see here now that they are in the system, right? Once they are in the system, what Marco talked about, you can then start actually using all the capabilities of the requirements and systems portal, which includes checking your requirements for inconsistencies, improving your requirements, checking for quality. So let's try it out. I mark here all the requirements in all the PDB requirements, and I'm going to go here to validate systems just to check the quality of these requirements. And now the value system is actually doing the assessment. It was successful. That's great. And I can see here that, okay, most of my requirements are pretty good. Some of them are only satisfactory. One of them needs work. So it will also tell me a bit what I need to improve. So avoiding vague terms, having specific measurements, right? So actually, I can get a very quick overview of what I need to improve in my requirements. But what I can also do is I can actually ask the value assistant to improve my requirements, right? So if I want a better written requirements, I can ask it to improve it. And you can see here that it actually comes up with an improved text and also gets a bit more specific, right? So it includes values for things that I didn't have. So if I continue, basically all these requirements will be improved. And so before I show you a bit how this is connected to the PCB design, I'm going to show you also what we talked about, the parametric requirements, right? So imagine you have requirements that have numbers inside them. What I can actually do here is I can what we call validify the requirements, and we will detect basically the values inside requirements, and you will see why this is important in a bit. But basically, now that I not only have a text of the requirement, but also have the value with the units, with the values, I can add margins to this. I can actually start creating rules for my verifications. But before we come into that part, now I want to connect this to my PCB design. So I have here in Altium 365, in my workspace, I have this drone power distribution board. And you can see here that now I don't have any requirements connected to it. And what I will do here on the requirements and systems portal is that I will actually mark all these requirements, and I will apply them to a specific system block in my design, right? So basically, they are not applicable to the power system, but I actually want to make them not only applicable to the power system, but to the power distribution board. Now, this power distribution board is actually connected, is actually designed in our system design module. And you can see here that it actually has a special symbol here because it's directly connected to the Altium project. You can see here also that there were values imported when I connected this. So all of these values from the PCB project are actually imported here and traced also against the requirements in the system. So if I go back to here and if I now open this project again, basically my requirements will now be connected here to the board. So if you are a PCB designer and if you're working on this board, you will now be able to directly see your requirements that you are designing against in where you are working, right? And what I can do here now is, imagine I'm working on this power schematics. I can now come here and I can say, okay, this requirement says that I need to distribute my power uniformly. I can actually place this requirement here on the board and say that, well, let me tag here Anand, for example, and say, can you check that these values are correct? And now my requirements are actually connected to the whole task management system here, and you will be able to follow then the progress of where these requirements were implemented. If I come back to the requirements systems portal, and imagine I'm saying now, okay, these requirements, you can see already here that it also added the design reference, right? So once I place the requirement on the board, you can also come back here and see where it was placed on which schematic document. And if I come here, for example, and say, I want to add a verification and validation activity to this requirement. So I'm going to link this to actually a design review and add this here. And you can see that now it's connected to the design review, but the status is not set yet. What I can do as a PCB designer or whoever works in this workspace, I can actually come here now and basically verify the requirement directly from here, right? So you can see now that there is 0 out of 1 verifications. There is a design review, and I can say, okay, now we check these requirements, it is verified. And this will automatically update verification also on the requirements management side. So you can see here now that it's verified and everything is green. And the other thing I wanted to come back to is that, well, you remember that I created the value from these requirements. These values can actually be directly connected to your PCB design. So if I come here and I will want to create a rule for these requirements, the rules are basically mathematical formulas that help me to automatically verify my system. So if I say here that the maximum cost of the PCB needs to be bigger than the cost of the power distribution boards. If I create this one, you can see that, well, right now it's not verified because actually the board costs $12 instead of 10. If I go back to my project here and I edit it, I will actually be able to edit these values here on the PCB side. Let's say that it now costs $9 US, and I will update this. When this is updated, it actually will propagate through the system, and it will automatically update this rule as well. So there you go. The system costs $9 instead. And I just want to finish this off. So here you can see how you can connect this to your board design, how you can automatically verify things, how you can manually verify things. And imagine you now need to send this out to your customer to say, okay, we verified this design. The last step you can do is actually you can export this in a document format. So I chose this specification, and I can actually choose here one template. Let's say the traceability and verification matrix. I can export these documents. And basically here you can then have a very nice report that you can send out to your suppliers. And let me see if it is downloaded yet. So basically here it's downloaded, and you can basically trace all your requirements here with the parent and children relationships, and also the verifications that you just made on the board. So this was a very quick rundown. I hope I covered some things that we talked about previously in the webinar. But yeah, any questions? Let us know.
Thank you so much. No, I think that was very, very insightful, very dense, of course. I mean, it's a lot of functionality. So thank you so much for giving the demo. If there is more interest, of course, reach out to us. Go to the website. We are giving demos on a daily basis, multiple times, for people who are interested, of course. Yeah, but let's wrap it up. Luis, thanks again. That was very good. So now back to me. I'm sharing the screen here. Okay. So, I mean, actually, what we have seen is like a run through of different, let's say, user flows or flows people are actually or can use in a day-to-day engineering or design environment. But why is that important? When you think back of what we have been discussing in the beginning about the disconnect and how different teams are still working very much isolated from each other. And this was just, I would say, the tip of the iceberg of what's actually possible in the whole A365 ecosystem. But specifically to here, like the thing you have been showing, Luis, like these automatic verifications, updating verification status from your design. So imagine different teams are working on that. Your electronic design engineers, they verify through a design review some parts of your board. So you as a system engineer, you get an instant feedback. Okay, what's your progress on this specific part of the system? So which, as I think everyone can imagine, there's a lot of time saved actually. So you don't have to go to the meetings anymore to ask, okay, what's the status about this set of requirements in terms of the design review, because you see it instantly inside the system. It's connected to each other. You have been showing this very good example of the traceability matrix. So you can, with almost a one click, generate these specifications or these traceability matrices, any other type of document you can imagine. And this, if you generate this from a system where you can rely on that the data is always up to date, you save a lot of work and you actually significantly reduce the amount of rework you have to take. And after all, what's also important, and this goes back to the traceability, we probably all need in engineering projects. The more regulated the industries, the more relevant this gets. Not only think of one specific design, but as Louise indicated in her demo, like a board is one part of a larger product of a system. And what we know is systems are just getting more complex. So with the system here, you get a tool at your fingertips which actually allows you or enables you to manage the complexity, which we will see increasing in the future. So, and Marco, if I can ask you to wrap this up more on a higher level perspective, what does it actually, from a requirement system portal perspective, like how does it fit now again into the larger context?
I think the key point is, if you zoom out again, right, requirements engineering is really one significant part of the overall electronics design process, and Altium 365 really has it covered from very beginning. So from almost the napkin stage, you can see Louise took requirements that you had in a spreadsheet and would just go into the system and takes it all the way to verification, manufacturing, and so on. So it really is the binding part. And this is not just something that makes engineers like happier or faster or a bit more efficient, but has real business impact too. So what we've seen, actually, we've asked Forrester to conduct a study on this, and what we found is that there's a real big financial benefit. In less than 6 months, you basically recover the investment that you made into such a system like A365. and you're able to like save hundreds of thousands basically annually for a team of 6 engineers only. And the reason is simply that all these engineers don't have to do all these steps manually. Like the things that Luis showed you now in what, 7 minutes or maybe 10 minutes is something that in a normal system would have taken days, right? Just finding the right documents, updating the right requirements, making sure that you actually copy paste the right things, looking at the status, another person making a spreadsheet just for tracking. All of these kind of things come together in one single system. And I think any engineer that basically wants to focus on the actual trade-offs between design choices, the actual challenges, should move into a system like Altium 365, where with the right applications for your needs, you can put together a system which allows you end-to-end to move fast in a collaborative way and save a lot of money and time for your organization, and then at the same time allow you as an engineer to really focus on the work that needs to be done to build actually better products in that become so much more important these days.
Marco, thanks a lot. Just to give you some insights already, there is a webinar upcoming, the next one in almost 3 weeks time, October 9th. It's about around the so-called electronic design dream team. So the requirement system portal is only one application, but when you think of, let's say, product development, electronic product development from a different perspective, you arrive at product lifecycle management, product data management, and then here our friends from Duro come into place. So register for this webinar, please, in 3 weeks, October the 9th. Will be very interesting. Michael will join it together with Andy and Luis. Register, and if you haven't given your feedback yet, please do so. I see almost 50 people have answered. Thank you so much. So with this, I think we are almost on time. Everyone, it was really a pleasure doing this with you today again. So for the US-based people, inform your colleagues there will be a webinar in the evening. For the US-based people, of course, in the morning. Thanks everyone for joining today. That was very interesting, very insightful. Thanks for your feedback. Thanks for all the questions. Again, we will get in touch with you with some answers for these questions. And have a good rest of the week and happy Wednesday. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.